Hello and welcome to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. I am your host for today, Shannon Vasconcelos, and we are deep into October, which is, according to me at least, the best month of the year. We've got the apple picking and the changing leaves. We've got it all. Of course, he's also got college applications, so hopefully we can help you out a little bit with those today to help you enjoy this month a little bit more. And we do have a great show lined up. In the back half of the show, my colleague Jen Simons is going to be joining me to answer listener submitted questions. So if you sent us a question recently, definitely stay tuned for that segment. But first, we're going to talk to another one of my fabulous colleagues, and he is a former admissions officer from Occidental College and Marquette and lots of other places. Steve Fernandez-Brennan. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Shannon. It's good to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. And you're joining us all the way from Hawaii. I'm in Boston, so we're really coast to coast, sea to shining sea today. And what is the fall like in Hawaii? Do you have changing leaves? Do you have any of that fall
70,
stuff?
78 and sunny.
Is that how it always is? Every
It,
month, could I ask that question? You'd give the same answer?
no, there's a wet and
Got it.
rainy season
Ah,
that is coming up for us, and we're excited about. So it'll drop from the mid 80s to the high 70s. So
nice.
yeah, it's not
Oh,
bad.
yeah, it's good everywhere. So we are anyway, October's my favorite month. We know that there's a lot of high school students out there, high school seniors that might not be feeling great this month if they know that they have college application essays on their plate and they are, staring at a blank page right now and they don't know how to get started and they're kind of feeling overwhelmed right now. We know that you're out there, folks, and we're going to try to help you today. So we're going to talk about writer's block when it comes to college essays and how to overcome it. And so I'm hoping you can help us out with this, Steve. So just, I guess, to start with the basics, Steve, I feel like writer's block is one of those things like, you know it when it's happening to you, but like, how would you actually define writer's block?
Right. It's defined as when someone has an inability to start writing or an inability to write at the same pace they've been writing. But for most of our kids, Shannon, for most of the people, our audience for today, it's the inability to get started writing.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. And what do you think? I don't know if it's the same thing that always causes writer's block or in particular with the college essay. What do you think is the psychology there? What's causing the writer's block?
Yeah, I think it's two things. I think it's one is not knowing what to write about, and two is being anxious about getting started. And
Mm.
those are interrelated, and sometimes it's 50-50 and sometimes it's 70-30. But it's really a matter of feeling like I don't have anything profound. What am I going to say
Mm.
that's significant? And I had a chance to talk to my brother in preparation for this session today, Shannon, because he's a professor of English. He
Mm.
teaches writing at the California Public University system. And he said, look, I can't assign profoundness. I can't assign profundity, right?
Right.
It's a matter of thinking about a story that lets me learn something, and being profound is not the goal.
Yes.
Writing The Great Gatsby is not the goal here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think students put so much pressure on themselves that I don't have anything to write about. If I had $1 every time a student says, look, my parents are still together. I've had good health. I've never lost the crucial game. Good. Don't write about losing the crucial game, by the way. Um, I don't have anything to write about. I say, admission officers aren't looking for something negative that's happened to you. They want to understand who you are, who your character is, and how you got to be that person.
Mm.
And it doesn't have to be some earth-shattering experience to write about. So I think that's one bucket,
Yeah.
that they feel that the topics in their lives don't rise to that level of the profound. Good
Right.
news, it doesn't have to. There's zero expectation.
Yes.
You can't assign the profound. Um,
Totally.
I think the other thing, Shannon, is just the anxiety about the application process.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm applying to school X, and school X has a GPA that mine's not quite there, so I'm going to use my essay to get me over the top.
Mm,
It doesn't
yeah.
work that way, right?
No. Yeah. How, in the grand scheme of things, you're sitting there as a former admissions officer who reviewed applications. How actually important is the college essay to an application? Is that student you just referenced who doesn't have the GPA and is hoping this essay will get them over the hump? Is that realistic?
Generally, no.
Mhm.
Generally, no. They have to have the numbers, right? Are there
Right.
exceptions? I hesitate to say there are exceptions because every student's immediately going to think that
That's me. I'm the
they
exception.
I'm the exception, right? But the reality is that you have to have the numbers. And
Yeah.
then within the pool of students who have the numbers, then it's a matter of, okay, what does the rest of the application package look like? Um, I've heard it said that essays don't get you in, but they can keep you out,
Mm,
which I think is an interesting way to
interesting.
reframe it. In that,
Yeah.
an aggressive essay or an inappropriate essay or an essay that simply doesn't spends the whole essay talking about when you were 10 and nothing more recent. The
Mhm.
essay that doesn't show me who you are. There's a ton of data in the student application file, Shannon, that shows me how smart you are. I don't need the essay to show me how smart you are.
Interesting. Okay.
I need the essay to show me not how you're going to be as a classmate. I have lots of evidence for that. How are you going to be as a roommate? How are you going to be as a member of my community? What is your character like? What are your core values? What kinds of things are important to you? Are you someone who has a sense of humor? Are you someone who has an incredible sense of dedication or perseverance? Are you someone who's genuinely curious about other people and other cultures and other languages? Are you someone who's kind? And how has
Mhm.
that kindness resonated through different parts of your life? And how have you leveraged that kindness or that curiosity or that perseverance? So that's what makes a successful essay. And so many times students get stuck on, again, that big story, right? That
Right.
that tragic event that I had, that sob story. And admission officers are not looking for that. They're looking for that character moment, that opportunity where you could have cut corners and you didn't. That opportunity when you could have
Mhm.
been walked past a situation, but instead you injected yourself to demonstrate kindness or empathy. And that says something really significant about your character. That's what can make a really successful essay.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's so important that it doesn't, your kindness doesn't have to be demonstrated by the fact you cured cancer.
Right.
It's, you sat next to the kid in the cafeteria who didn't have anyone to sit with, or, whatever it was. It's small moments that can tell something about who you are.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
That's perfect. And I do think that that takes a lot of the pressure off. This is not something that's going to make or break you. There's so many pieces of the application, as you said, that tell the admissions officer parts of who you are. And
Right.
this is just one more piece of that.
It is. And, I don't want to say it's not important because it does put a face with the file.
Yep.
Um, and it does give the admission officer a chance to learn about you in a way that they simply aren't going to from the rest of the process.
Mm-hmm.
Even at schools that interview you, an interview is 15 minutes. They need a writing sample as well to sort of help tie that all together. It's the mortar that ties the bricks together.
Oh, I love that. That's such a good analogy. So, what if, okay, I hope we've helped some people already by just taking a bit of that pressure off. But, okay, what if you're still
Dialing
there?
down the stress, right?
Dial
Yeah,
it down. That's what we're here for. But okay, you know this is not going to make or break you what you're going to put on this page, but you're still staring at the blank screen here and don't know where to go from here. What if you're a student who feels like they've got writer's block, they just can't get started? What can you do to try and help you get over it?
so there's a lot of great advice online that I was taking a look at in preparation for this conversation. What I have found and what my colleagues, and I polled our colleagues as well, if they had suggested successful
Mhm.
stories, what I have found something that's really helpful is just to get a student writing about something. Just
Mm.
get writing about something. So I do a free write exercise where a student writes for 10 minutes. They put their pen, and notice I say pen, on paper. I think there's something
What?
about
What's that, Steve?
I know. I'm showing both my age and my pedagogies here.
Right.
but there's something about the mechanics of writing longhand that allows a student to get some ideas flowing.
Mm.
And there's some evidence to support this. It's not just me being cranky and old. There's some evidence to support this that says
Well,
that
you're being that too, but in addition, there's
That's
evidence.
fair. Totally. Yeah. And just to write about their day, 10 minutes, just to break the seal, so to say, get some
Mm.
writing going. One thing I do, depending on the kind of writer's block that they have, you can do a web search for this image of The Great Gatsby was written in longhand. And there are images of F. Scott Fitzgerald's original drafts where he's crossed things, he's crossed off whole paragraphs, and he circled things and made arrows and carets and inserted things to show that writing is an iterative process. It's back and forth. It takes multiple drafts. It takes multiple iterations. And sometimes for some students, the writer's block is that you've heard the expression that the perfection is the enemy of the good or the
Yes.
possible, right?
Yes, totally.
They're waiting for their perfect draft to come flowing out of their fingers onto the Word document, and that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so showing them not to set, again, the expectation that you're going to write like F. Scott Fitzgerald. That's not the expectation. Setting the expectation that there's going to be multiple drafts here. The first draft is the hardest. Just get something down. And it doesn't matter if 80% of your first draft is garbage. Guess what? We have a 20% start. That's amazing. Yeah. That's great. I love that. You start with one idea, and I think I'm going to go in this particular direction. Writing is a crucible. Writing will burn away the chaff. Just the act of writing will get rid of the bad stuff that's not going to work. And so you start writing and you see, I'm going in this direction. You know what? 50, 60, 80% in, I take a sharp right turn. That's the good stuff. That's what we want. And so we get rid of all that other stuff. That's great. Hey, we've got our intro paragraph. Who cares that it came at the fourth, fifth paragraph? We've got a place to start. And so there's nothing quite like helping writing beyond writing. And I know it sounds like that's not helpful. What are you telling me today? But when people ask Stephen King for advice on how to be a writer, he says, write.
I love that. That's perfect. And out of just curiosity, and I'm sure it's different for every student, how many drafts does it tend to take to get a completed essay?
Well, my record of working with a student is 27. So that was a student who every draft had writer's block, and every draft came up with a new idea. Oh, this isn't profound enough. This isn't significant enough. This isn't me enough. This isn't. And so really, that's not fair, because it really took about 4 drafts once we got the topic that they decided was an appropriate one, right? So I think 3 or 4 drafts often. Once you have the topic, once you know what you want to write about, I think 3 or 4 drafts is sort of a good number. Keeping my eye on the calendar, Shannon, if you had asked me that question in August, I might have had a little bit of a bigger number, but here we are in October, and I think 3 or 4. Yeah.
Yep. I think that makes perfect sense. Now, what if we've got both students and parents who listen to this show.
Sure.
So now you're a parent and you're watching your kids struggle, which is, of course, as a parent, the hardest thing in the world. What can you as a parent do? You can't write the essay for them. Please don't. Right. We beg of you. What can you do to kind of help them get over the writer's block?
It's pretty apparent when parents try to write the essay for their student. The voice just doesn't sound like a 17-year-old. So please don't do that. We do want the student's authentic voice to be part of this process, right? I had a call just yesterday, Shannon, with a parent who's like, look, I can't nag my kid anymore. Can you nag my kid for me? Said, well, at some point nagging loses its effectiveness. They stop hearing it. Parents can do the interview and ask their students some interview questions just to get, again, longhand writing, or even on their laptop. Just ask them some interview questions about what I think are effective questions are questions that allow the student to reflect on growth. So ask them some questions about the difference between ninth grade and today. In ninth grade, how did you feel when you started school? How would you have described yourself in 5 words? In ninth grade, what were your favorite subjects? In ninth grade, what were your favorite activities? Now, what are your favorite activities? If you had to choose one thing that you could do differently in ninth grade, what would you do? How have you learned? What's something exciting that you've learned since ninth grade? Those kinds of questions can hopefully engender some writing, can get some students getting some momentum, and can identify some of those growth moments, inflection points, and character values, core values that allow a student to have a good writing topic ultimately.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think correct me if I'm wrong here, you want to think back to yourself at ninth grade and your growth since then. Your essay should not be focused on that ninth grade you. Is
That's
that
correct.
correct?
Or
Yeah.
certainly before ninth grade.
Yes.
Um, I think sometimes students fall into that trap. They have something significant that affected their trajectory when they were younger,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to write about it. But oftentimes it's so far back and it's been such a key part of their experience that they can't show the growth from it. They can't
Yeah.
show me the so what. They can't show me the inflection point or how they've grown from that. I call that the twin trap, Shannon, that I want to write about having a twin, but I've always had a twin. So how do I know how I'm different because I've had a twin?
Ah,
There's
mhm.
never been a moment where I can say, well, because I had a twin, this is different, because
Right.
that's always been there, right? I want to
Yes.
write about when my family moved. Sometimes students have a really compelling or interesting immigration story that they want to write about. If it happened in ninth grade, I'm all ears. If it happened in 10th grade, tell me about it. If it happened when you were 7, that's
Yeah.
harder to write about, right?
Yeah.
And so think about things that are more recent. Think about things that provide an inflection point or that growth point or that give me a chance to show your character. And it might still be that, but it might not. And I want students to be
Mm.
open and not be wedded to their first idea. Because sometimes that's something else that causes writer's block is they get stuck, they get married to their first idea and they just won't let it go. I'm like, this is interesting writing, but this is interesting writing for my brother's class next year. When you're a college
Mhm.
first year and you're in a first year English class, this is that kind of writing. It's not the kind of writing that shows me growth. And don't get stuck, don't get married to some nice turn of phrase, a nice sentence that you've written that doesn't allow you to show what you need to show in a college admissions essay.
Totally. And yeah, I think you can, and I think it's so important to say just start writing, and there's going to be multiple drafts because sometimes you have one idea, you write an essay about that, but you find it's not too interesting. And the most interesting thing is like one line in it that could take you in a totally different direction. And that's really the right topic. So I think not being married to that first idea is so key.
It's so key. And you don't know
Yeah.
what that line is until you start writing because it's
Right.
it's
Yes.
buried. It's
Yes.
buried under that story that you have from when you were 10, or
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
buried under this idea that just doesn't really have legs. That's okay. That's why you have to start writing. And the first draft is the hardest, and the first draft is usually the worst. It's always the
Mhm.
worst. And you're going to
Right.
find something you'll be able to pull out of that. That's such a great point.
That's perfect. So are there particular, I know you mentioned the longhand Great Gatsby that you can look up. Are there particular resources that a student can find or tap into that might help them with this
Like,
process?
absolutely. And like all else related to writing, I really like to recommend Purdue OWL, Purdue Online Writing Lab, Purdue OWL,
Right.
Purdue University in Indiana. Um, has some amazing resources there for students. They have a whole page on how to help get over writing block. Now, theirs is more geared for college students who have already written their essay.
Mhm.
And so you have a topic. And I think that's what's hard for some students with this is that they, the topic is themselves,
Mhm.
and it's hard to write about themselves.
So hard.
And it's hard to find one particular thing of the universe that is my interior universe that is myself. What's the one thing that I choose to write about? So
Mhm.
the Purdue suggestions are somewhat limited in efficacy. They're not as useful for students who are looking to start writing for this. Not all of them. Some of them are still really, really
Yeah.
good. So I think that's a good place to start. The University of Illinois Springfield campus has a great sheet of tips and tricks that can help, which I thought was really useful. And they help kind of break it down and say, if you're stuck and you're stuck because of X, then here's ABC that you can do to help move forward with it. So if you just do a web search for University of Illinois Springfield writer's block, it'll take you to their page. It breaks down the different kinds. Is it motivation? Is it distraction? Is it anxiety? Is it, what is it that, do I feel like it's not good enough? It doesn't meet the standard of everybody else's writing. First of all, stop reading everybody else's college admissions essays for a number of reasons, Shannon. But one is that you're not going to think that your writing is going to be the same quality. And two is that it's going to cloud your own judgment. You're going to lose your voice in that.
Yeah.
And there are some really bad essays out there that people say, oh, I got into school ABC and I got in because of this essay. Well, unless you were sitting around that proverbial oak table and decisions were being made about, conversations were being had about your essay, you don't know if you got in because of that essay.
Yeah.
Or maybe in spite of that essay.
Right. Totally. And I think the point that this is writing about yourself, and that's really, really hard. I think we should reiterate that for a high school student. This is very likely the first time you've had to do that. You might be used to writing book reports, term papers, things like that. And I think to give a shout out to the students out there who are doing this right now, it is in fact really, really hard. So don't beat yourself up about it if it doesn't come super naturally all at once.
It is really hard. And another resource I'd like to direct folks to is that on our College Coach blog, we have a great entry by our colleague Kenan, who wrote about writer's block specifically for the college essay and how to get started for that. So you can do a web search for the Bright Horizons College Coach blog, and then there just put in the search feature essays, and you'll be able to see his post on that. So that's a great post too, to help students get off the dime and start writing.
Exactly. Oh, you're putting the pressure on now, Steve. I like it.
I'm telling you, the clock is ticking.
I know. Are there particular essays or kinds of essays that students do tend to get blocked on the most?
So thank you for that question. Yes. And one way to get over writer's block is to not tackle the hardest ones first. So if the student is applying to the University of California system, start with those UC essays because they're easier. They're shorter. They're 350 words versus that common application, the CAPS, common application personal statement. The CAPS essay is 650 words. It's about yourself. It's more open-ended. Those UC essays are shorter. They're more interview questions. Write about your creativity. Write about your leadership. Write about your greatest talent or skill. Most of the writers that I've worked with, and notice I didn't say students there because they're all writers. Everybody's a writer. Most of the writers I've worked with have some momentum that they're able to get from those UC essays. And so the ones that they tend to have the writer's block on is that CAPS essay.
Right. And can you, if you are applying to UC schools and Common App schools, can you use a UC essay for your Common App essay?
Sure. Usually what happens is one of the 4 UC essays that you have to write, you have 500 words of content instead of 350. Usually there's something there that you're really excited about. And once you hit your groove, you find that you have a lot to say. That's a great essay that you can scale up for your CAPS essay, for your Common App essay. And so I think starting with the UC essays is really a good place to start. If you're not applying to the UC, look at those supplemental essay prompts and see if those are a little bit more accessible. Say you're applying to the University of Washington and they have an essay about community. Describe the world that you come from and how you as a product of that world will help make the University of Washington more diverse. Great. You can just start by describing the world that you come from, and at least that gets you started, right?
Yeah, totally. Are there other tips for the supplementals, because they tend to be sort of more specific in nature?
There are a lot of supplemental essay questions that tend to be shorter, 150, 200, 250 words that ask, how did you get interested in this major? Most students can tell me that off the top of their heads, right? And so that is where some students can find some momentum that they can then hopefully leverage and get over the hump to start writing that main CAPS essay.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, we've been talking a lot to seniors who are working on those essays now. What about if you're an underclassman and you're not going to be working on your essay, for another 9 months, let's say, at least if you're a junior. Are there things you can be doing now as an underclassman to help you get in the right mindset that might help prevent the writer's block down the line when the time comes to actually write your essay?
Yeah, I think that and please don't start your essays yet because the prompts change from year to year. You've got
Yes.
plenty of things to work on if you're younger students. Focus on your grades, focus on developing some interesting extracurricular activities. But the biggest thing is to read, which might sound like a cop-out, but it's learning facility with language, learning how language works, reading beyond the bare minimum of school will really help you develop some tools in your toolkit when it's time to write. And I think that's something that will really help students when they are faced with that blinking cursor at the top of the page and they need to write about themselves.
Right. Are there specific books or types of books, or is it even just books? Are there other things kids should be reading?
It's books, it's magazines, you know, whatever the family's comfortable with as far as periodical content. I like to recommend the New Yorker and the Atlantic because they're a little bit more advanced reading.
Mhm.
A daily newspaper, remember those? You know, subscribe to one of those, get a daily subscription in your inbox and read the top 3 stories from
Mm,
the Washington Post, the New York Times, the LA Times, the Denver Post, whichever's your local, you know, hometown paper.
yeah.
Um, just to see how the different ways that writing can work. I think those are great sources to read for students to help them again build their toolkit so they're ready to start writing when the time comes in 9 months or
Right.
so.
That's great. And so how about I go back to the seniors to sort of wrap up? This episode is dropping on October 19th. Our first early deadlines are November 1st. If you've got a blank page in front of you right now, do you have time to get the essay done to meet November 1st deadlines?
I think you do. I think you need to
Yeah.
hustle. I
Yep.
think you do though. And starting with some of those supplemental essays because it still feels like you're making progress and that can take some of the pressure off is a great place to start. But if you can get 4 drafts in between the 19th and the 1st, but it's not too late, but you do need to hustle. You need to get some production going. So whichever of these
Awesome.
tips you find that might speak to you a little bit, start with those and just start writing. There's no such
Yeah.
thing as bad writing on a first draft. There's really not. You just got to find that momentum, got to find that kernel, got to find that buried under the 60% of the first draft, that 30-40% of good stuff that you can pull out and then leverage for your next drafts.
That's perfect. Just right. Listen to Stephen King and Steve Fernandez-Brennan. Same advice. Just
That's it.
right.
Just right. That's it, Shannon.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today, Steve. So many great tips, and I feel students' wheels turning as we speak.
I hope so.
I hear the keyboard clicks or the pen scraping
The
against
pen's
the page.
scraping, scratching on the page. Yep. Love it.
Yes.
Love it. Well, all the best to our seniors, all the best to our students, and we look forward to helping them, you know, as much as we can. So good luck to them.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Steve. And listeners, stick around. We're going to take a quick break and then we will be back to answer your questions. Stay tuned.